the invite.
Great, thanks Cassiana. Hi team, thanks so much for joining today's retrospective where we'll discuss the recently completed 360 feedback process. Our aim today is to take some learnings from this process and to reiterate and improve in time for our next 360 feedback cycle. We already have had some amazing feedback from team members which can be found in the issue. I've linked a note in the agenda doc summarising some of the feedback that's already been presented. I've categorised that feedback into 3 sections, the overall process, the platform that we use, Culture, and the content, so the questions that have been asked. And today's call will structure into 3 different sections. So what did we do well, what should we have done better, and what are the next steps? The first 2 sections we'll allot 10 minutes to, and the final section we'll allot 5 minutes to. So I suppose in the interest of time, it would be great to kick off and discuss what did we do well and what should we definitely keep on doing. Oliver, can we jump over to you to verbalize your thoughts? Do we have Oliver on the call?
So I was just on another call with him. I think he'll be joining momentarily.
Sure. Anyone else have any further thoughts on what we did well and what we should definitely keep on doing? Care to verbalize?
Hi, I can. This is Amanda. I'm in product management. I really liked the app, the guidance from the app. I found it to be really helpful and gave good tips. The reference that you linked to, I think it might have been in the email of like what to consider when you're giving feedback, things like that. That was really helpful as well. It's now giving me reminders on following up with my tasks and things that I think is helpful in keeping me accountable, because I got one and I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about this since the day I made it. So I also like that.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Amanda. Anyone have any further thoughts while we wait for Oliver to join?
Yeah, I had a piece of feedback. One thing I really liked is how it's based on our values. An idea that my manager and I had was maybe we could make it a little bit more role specific. So giving examples of, what does, results look like based on a role. So for an AE versus a, SA.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Brooke. Okay, I'll share Olivier's comment there. For a given GitLab value, people can do great in some aspects of, but could improve in others. I really like the fact that I could express this and not have a value excluded from one section once used in the other. Thanks for sharing, Olivier. Does anyone have any further thoughts on what we did well and what we should definitely keep on doing for further iterations of this process?
Good morning. I would really like to see a ability to have somewhat of a back and forth where you might be able to request more information about a given comment. I know it's supposed to be anonymous, but that way you could still stay anonymous, and that way the person on the other side could just know, okay, maybe I can, provide more guidance or what have you.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. We certainly work with Culture to see if we can integrate that into future processes going forward. It's definitely been a common ask to, I suppose, make the feedback identifiable so that people can follow up and be sure to get, I suppose, solid examples to make sure they're tangible and workable and they can integrate that into their work life.
Hi, hey Ross, this is Ken Grabowski. Something I experienced, and so I've only been at GitLab 3 months, so this was my first cycle to go through this. Something I experienced with my reports is they were rather selective about who they sought feedback from. And in a couple of particular instances, I noticed where it was purely just peer-to-peer and not necessarily including their stakeholders to provide feedback. I didn't want to jump in and change that. Is there a process or a best practice that we can employ and roll down to the teams as to who they should be seeking feedback from?
Yeah, sure. I think we advised in the handbook to seek feedback from team members in which you've regularly interacted with over the course of the past couple of months on specific projects, whether it be day-to-day BAU. But certainly I would encourage managers to also gather insights from their team members to say, have you considered getting some feedback from X, etc. Anyone else in the wider people team have thoughts on that question from Ken?
Ken, I will just add, we're still discussing the things we did well. We can move on to the things we haven't done well and that we can do better. But I just want to highlight we're still in this first topic. So not sure if we're ready to move over, if anyone still wanted to add there. Otherwise, we can move over and continue discussing this.
Thank you, Nadia. Anyone else want to bring to the table anything that they felt we've done well in this process before moving on to things that they think we should improve upon?
I'd like to add one thing real quick. So my name is James Sandlin. I'm in Portland. So I really was impressed with how easy it was to get the feedback that I requested. Historically, when I've managed teams, thankfully I'm not a manager here, but historically when I've had to manage teams, my team members would provide a list of people and they would be contacted asking for feedback. And then I would be required to go out and spend weeks babysitting or hammering, trying to get the feedback from the other people that were just too busy. Whereas here, I've been really impressed that I didn't have to beg. I didn't have to go ask. I mean, I provided the names and they did it. I hope we continue, supporting one another in such a fashion. So I was really impressed there.
Thanks so much for sharing, James. Really good insight there. Very appreciative of team members that gave you feedback. Any additional commentary in around what we've done well in this process, what we should keep in next iterations?
Yeah, I wanted to call out, I appreciate people team's flexibility with the process. I like that it was optional. Some people didn't feel comfortable. Maybe they were new. That was really cool. And I also like that we adjusted the timeline in response to people not being able to complete it. For me, I wish we'd stuck to one date because that would actually make me prioritize it, but I'm not everyone. So I appreciate that that's not true for everybody. So thank you very much for that flexibility. Much appreciated.
Thank you for that,
And
Daniel. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of add on to what Dan said. I think the people team did a great job on there are a lot of requests to add people later to your 360 to review, and you all did that really quickly, and that was really awesome. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, JC. Yeah, we had quite a couple of requests for the extension of feedback. I suppose we were stuck between a rock and a hard place. We wanted people to get as much feedback as they could possibly get in the timelines that we set, but we're also appreciative of certain releases and everything that's going on in the world. And thanks so much, JC. Hopefully next time around we can have Culture Amp have the ability to add people from the user side as opposed to needing to request from the people team to add them afterwards. Any additional feedback or commentary?
All right, I guess I could chime in here. So I can't speak to the improvements from last year's process because I wasn't here last year. So this iteration is probably much better than last year's, but I can't speak to that. I do understand the concept of iteration, which we're always faced with that challenge. And I'm going to compare you to my previous experiences. It was a lot easier communicating the results to the team in a categorized and summarized format. I would have to say that was the biggest strength after all the data was in. And it was just a very easy process for me to do that, as well as the ability to export it to PDF and maybe save it somewhere so that we can refer to the same thing later on in the year to see where we've improved. So I really appreciated the summary for both the textual feedback as well as the charts below. Charts were winning right there. So thanks for your help. And I understand this may be MVC too, I don't know, but I keep that in mind, and please keep that in mind as I'm giving you feedback or as we're all giving you feedback. We know this is an iterative process. Thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing, Darva, and thanks so much everyone for your commentary there. We're now at 10 minutes in, so with that I'll hand over to Rose Tacken, who will look after the next 2 sections of the retrospective.
Thanks, Ross, and thanks everyone for all these points, as well as for the feedback given prior to this call. Yes, so let's focus on some things we can try to improve on or iterate on for next iterations. I think indeed, Rashad, you gave a great suggestion here of going back and forth. Just my question on this would be, would that be in the tool? Would that be maybe by requesting a name? Like, what would be your thoughts about how we can iterate on this? If you're still on the call. Rashad, are you still here?
Oh, yes, I am. I didn't know you were talking to me specifically. I'm kind of multitasking.
Oh, no worries.
Come again, please.
Oh, yeah. So I was wondering, so you said you wanted to go back and forth. If you had a question on a certain feedback, would you prefer that to be via the tool, or would that be something we request to change from Culture Amp, or would that be something we try to change in our process?
No, I was thinking all within the tool.
Yeah.
Or maybe
exactly.
It's just extended for a week afterwards, where someone, maybe it's as simple as and standardized as individual requests more information. So it doesn't matter what was said. It's just having that out. Maybe that's the first iteration, just to see if that's enough. And then maybe we go on further to outside the tool or something, if that's what people want. That seems like the easiest change.
Yeah, exactly. Good. All right, cool. Then I know where we can categorize this feedback. Thanks for elaborating here.
Yeah.
Good. I think, Olivier, are you on the call? You have point B.
Thanks. Thank you for covering my first item because I was late. Sorry about that.
Nice.
So yeah, one thing that I think was a bit misleading is when mentioning the GitLab value, we have the small description, a small excerpt here in Culture MP, and I think it was sometimes a bit reductive and not reflective of the full value. I mean, our value have become very complex, and I think the most misleading one, for example, was efficiency one, which was only stating about writing things in the handbook. And I know I'm really bad at writing things in the handbook. I'm trying to get better at this. But on the other hand, I was good at other aspect of efficiency. And for some people giving feedback, I think it might be misleading. So I would like to maybe for the next iteration, incentive people to go read the values. I think a lot of us did that before writing the feedback, but I think, yeah, just reading that small excerpt might be a bit misleading.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and maybe putting what are your thoughts on putting a link maybe in the particular description? Would that be helpful?
Sure. Yeah, a link would be the best option, I think.
Good. Dan, do you have any additional thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it actually is important because you'll interpret, and I really like, Olivier, the use of reductive. That was great. I wish I'd come up with that word. Yours was better. But it really guides your feedback to someone when we have these little one sentence explanations that don't really, or may not encapsulate the full understanding of what the values are. And so I find that actually sways what I'm going to say in some manner. So I'd probably prefer just to have a straight link.
Yeah.
So yeah, just
awesome.
Mostly agreeing with Olivier. Thanks for that.
And
good.
As somebody
who's
done this a few times, I can definitely say when I do these reviews, I actually have the values page open. And now that we have some of the alignment frameworks in place for career progression, I also have that page for whomever I'm doing these 360 for open. So I can actively look at more than just the one sentence, but the larger descriptions, but also what they can work on to improve, to work further towards whatever their next progression is.
That's great. Yeah, good. We can add that maybe to also the guidelines, right? Saying like, hey, this, feel free to take a look at like the value, like the full value space. This is the link, but also maybe job, families, or description. Olivier, you have an additional point here?
Yeah, I think it might be good to maybe announce that when we are, announcing company-wide that the 360 feedback cycle is starting soon, we could say, hey, this is a good time for you to start reviewing the value because, well, it's a huge page. It could take quite some time, particularly if you're not a native English speaker. So at some point for me, it looks like I'm reviewing an insurance contract. I had to think very deeply about each word to correctly understand what I'm reading. So it takes quite some time, yeah.
Yeah, good. All great suggestions. Thanks for this. I think point C then.
Yeah, I think that having something more like a 1 to 5 rating, I think for me at least, like looking at all the values and kind of coming up with a sentence for each, I think it maybe speaks to the comment earlier about like some people might be good at one area or not so good at another area of what you might consider part of a value. Abstracting that a little more into something that was like, oh, this person's like a 4, but then giving explanations. For me, having like specific questions around the manager feedback was really helpful because it helps me really focus in the feedback I'm giving. I think that's a lot harder to prepare, of course, it's a lot more involved. But I think that would mean it would be a little bit more helpful to get sort of ratings in that area. That's my thought anyway. Nicole has a comment.
If I can find my mute key. Related to that, I think articulating better examples, and then possibly if we're going to add numerical values, be able to articulate where those anchor points are for each one of the values, could, like when you're interviewing people or doing surveys, user interviews, you don't want to lead people, but in this particular case, we do want to lead people to be giving certain types of feedback. And so I think doing that, giving them specific examples to spark them to think in the direction we want, and maybe even anchor them within, if we had a grade of this is what a 5 looks like, or this is what a 1 looks like, I think could help get more granular and precise feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for adding this. I wonder, yeah, I think this is something we should give a bit more thought to, because we also received some feedback around we don't want to make it a rating, and advice of Culture Amp in 360s is not to do a rating. So I think that's sort of where, but I definitely agree that we could give more or better guidelines or expectations of what type of feedback we want to get, right? Or what type of feedback you should be putting in to these things. So this is a bit of the, where the thought process, I think we can gather more data maybe or input to ultimately make a decision on this for next time around. So this is but thank you for adding this. This is great.
Yeah, just wanted to, I know you're trying to move quickly, but just on that point, Rose, the concern here is that if I'm getting feedback and honesty from people saying, hey, I think you could be better at this, and my manager and I look at that and say, yeah, there's maybe an instance where this was, and that was the interaction you had with that person, and that was fairly limited, that's not necessarily going to be actionable. So the fact that we have some written out specific thing that is like, hey, you did this thing one time, that might be 2 months ago, because that's the cycle we do. And so from that perspective, I would think that there's some level of interpretation in this feedback process, being that I was doing it, this is what I was doing, if to read between the lines, to say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we've seen some behavior here, let's see how we can improve that, what action items we want to take. There's always interpretation and work between the person receiving the feedback and their manager to come up with real actionable steps. So I think having it like we have to specifically take this action that someone suggested actually might not be what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, I think the overall point is here around concretizing. Is it concretizing? Is that a word? I don't know. The feedback, right? Or making it more actionable. Make sure that the actions taken from the feedback are more clear. I do think that's definitely great. Like, and we can think about ways how we can solve this, so that it either can be a rating or feedback examples, or yeah. Good. I think point D. Yes.
Riz, it's Nadia. Yeah, I didn't add anything. I was about to start typing and I thought I'll just speak up. I think if we think about the bigger talent development program and KR that we're currently working on, a rating might not be such a bad idea, because 360s are going to be part of our bigger talent development program. And no, we haven't brought them together, but we're working on that now. The one thing I can think about is, if you're going to be doing a 9-box assessment and you did do the 360, and as a manager you then get that feedback and you can clearly see a trend, right? It would be easier to then use that as a opportunity to complete the 9-box versus just adding a subjective number. And so I do want to say, I actually hear where this is coming from, and I can relate to it, because if there is no trend and it is once-off feedback, I think it's very hard to action, especially if it was that one occurrence. It's in the past, either the person apologized if it was something very sensitive, but I think if it is a trend, it would help with that next step of doing our talent assessment reviews. So I just wanted to add that I do think a rating could help, although we definitely don't want to label someone based on that rating.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll leave it open, right? But I don't know what the action items are from the talent assessment and how it will tie in. Yeah, let's leave it open and see how we can solve for this, because I think there's multiple ways maybe to do this. Jason, do you want to verbalize before I go to? Because I want to be mindful of the time
quickly.
here.
I don't want to hold up. Basically, I would actually strongly suggest that you not ask for a numeric rating from the ICs that are doing reviews. From skip level or managers, then that makes some sense. But trying to put that weight of let's grade this person on theirs in a way that they may not actually be able to scope themselves it's not a clear way to provide that kind of value. I'm going to write that because it'll be clearer. Please go ahead to the next item.
Thanks. No, thanks for adding this. I do think this is, indeed, I agree with Dan suggesting to maybe take this to the issue or to an issue, and also tied into Nadia's point, maybe we could see like how we can tie this all into the talent assessment program and what would be like a best practice or the best way to solve for this. I think we only have a few more minutes left, if we even have time left. Philip, on D, do you want to verbalize your point?
Sure, thanks, Rose. Very quick one. For the people who are doing the reviews and giving the feedback for multiple coworkers in a row, like me, that's probably actually everyone. It was really annoying at the end of the survey to hit that page that was actually a dead end. You had to write the survey over and over again, and that was the same survey, so it wasn't making any sense. And I know it's probably not on your side, it's probably a feedback for culture ramp, but I found that really annoying. I maybe 16 people to give feedback to, and I saw that page 16 times, and there's no way to go to the next coworker directly. You had to update their URL or give feedback. So yeah, if you can update that, please, that would be awesome.
Yes, I think there's nobody on this call or in the issue who doesn't agree with you. So definitely that's something. Good. So I think Cassiana just gave us the 2-minute warning. So I just do want to spend like the last 2 minutes on the wrap up on the next sections. Also, thanks everyone for adding their other points. We will definitely review them async after this call. So one of the next actions I have would be to put the link to the handbook to the handbook pages on the value. If we would continue this with the values, we have this open item about ratings, making feedback more actionable, concrete. I think that could be something which we have to tie into talent assessment. And Nadia, do you have a next action item here?
I'm just adding the feature requests to culture and so I don't forget to do them.
Yes, I think we can maybe, because Ross did really well was categorizing into 3 items. I think everything which is in the culture and systems item, we could maybe put that to culture amp and see what they come back with. Are there any other next actions for now. I can take the first item on putting the link to the values points. Good. Okay, so I think we're at time. We'll continue to move the additional feedback also to the issue and work from there. And then I want to thank everybody for all their input here. This is super helpful. And yeah, we're looking forward to the next cycle.
Thank you all.
Thanks, all.